Hello, this is Ruban Selvanayagam from Property Solvers, and welcome to another podcast. I'm back here once again with James Durr. How are you, James?
I'm good, Ruben.
Good. Okay, so we're going to go with a topic today that James thought would be interesting to discuss, and that is on investing in property or real estate abroad. So perhaps, James, you want to start by kind of indicating why you thought this was a good topic to go ahead with.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Ruben, I would say that at the start of my property journey, like you look around at sort of a lot of different sort of strategies to see what you think would make sort of the most money. And I remember back when I started, there was a couple of things that I was looking at that I would describe now in retrospect as extremely high risk strategies. One of them was buying off plan, and the other one was buying property abroad. And maybe we can do a separate podcast about buying property off plan, because I think a lot of people as well, when they start their property journey, it seems like a kind of a way to get rich quick. In that, like, the concept seems so simple. You know, you buy a property, a flat in the early stages of development, and then you wait sort of the 2 years while it's being built. And at the time it's built, like you can just sell it and realize a capital gain. And I think the reason why it's so attractive is because with a lot of these off plan, and it's the same when you buy property abroad, you know, it's low money down initially. So you might be able to, like, I remember when I was starting out, there was a lot of people buying in places in Eastern Europe, like Bulgaria and Romania. Yeah. And a lot of these flats, like, it'd be like, put 2,000 down, you know, put $2,000 down. Most people, when they're starting, even if they don't have $2,000 in their bank account, they can probably get access to 2K. And then there would be stage payments until the point of completion. So you're kind of getting in for more and more. And obviously there's several inherent risks with following that strategy. So I just thought it was worth maybe exploring some of those risks. Obviously there's some advantages as well from investing abroad, and some people have made it work. But yeah, that was just my initial thoughts about why it would be something that might be worth looking at.
Yeah, I mean, the whole appeal of it sometimes does sound really good and really compelling. You know, you're thinking to yourself, well, you know, I can buy a property in this country, and I think a lot of and you're going to make a lot of money from it because the country's economy is doing really well. You know, there might be deemed to be low political risk, and I think a lot of the companies that often sell these properties abroad to UK investors do a really good job with their marketing. I remember the similar time to when you were getting involved in property, going along with you to Property Investor Show and all that kind of thing. You see these stands, and it does look good because you're kind of thinking to yourself, oh, you know, well, I could buy this property and I'll have a bit of a holiday home as well if I need it, you know. And they have a very good sales team that makes you think, okay, well, maybe there's something here. But if you kind of, you know, peel it back a little bit, you often see there's a number of inherent risks involved with kind of.
I mean, the women were good enough looking, Ruben, at the Brazil stand to see you over there, I think, for a while.
I mean, no comment. Yeah, I mean, it's just the idea of which, you know, yeah, let's talk about Brazil, for example. I mean, back in 2006, 2007, we looked into Brazil and investing, well, potentially just looking into development out there. At that time, Brazil was being labeled as one of the BRIC countries, and it was bucking the trend in terms of what was happening over there relative to the UK. So, you know, the economy was actually doing quite well when the UK economy was in free fall and we were in the midst of the global financial crisis. You know, there's a massive housing deficit in Brazil. So myself and James, we went over there. This was like 2008, 2009. Just to have a look and see what was going on out there. And yeah, it was obvious that there is a massive housing shortage. You know, finance was a difficult thing, but we were a little bit kind of naive when we went out there thinking that we could kind of do this, that, and the other. But we soon realized that it's just a a complete minefield, because you're dealing with an economy that you have a housing sector that you have no idea about. We didn't really speak the language. I mean, James's Spanish is fluent. I ended up learning Portuguese, but even then, you're so insignificant in terms of like the wider market, and they're just there to take you for a ride. And I know when I was out there was quite a few British, US investors out there that were kind of getting involved, particularly in the social housing market, and they were losing a lot of money just by kind of thinking that they can get into this sector. And problem with countries like Brazil is that it's just super corrupt as well. I was hearing of people buying land, putting a decent chunk of money into the land plot, and then the legal system out there was revealing that they weren't actually taking ownership of the property, and family owners were coming back to them saying, no, this is my land, and it was getting violent and things like that. Some real crazy stuff was going on there. So, we slowly started to realize that it was just too risky, and then not to mention all the other risks that come involved with it. You've got exchange rate risks, you've got in countries like Brazil, you've got political risks, you've got the fact that you don't speak the language, and a very convoluted legal system. So I'm making it sound like I'm super against investing abroad, but I think my eyes are really open to Brazil.
Ruben, if we just roll back a little bit, because when we did sort of first go over to Brazil, if any of you guys out there know Brazil well, there's a place called Florianópolis, and it's in the most sort of high income per capita state called Santa Catarina in Brazil. And when we went there, like, there was definitely opportunities in land, and we were looking at like building sort of, we had a plot that we could build 100 flats on, and we had architects, engineers, and we were getting quite far down the process. And to be fair, at that time, like, things actually looked quite good with that opportunity. And certainly in terms of like prices and how they went in that area after that time, I mean, they did shoot up. So assuming, and it's a big assumption, that we could have controlled build costs and we could have executed on that build, I mean, it could have been majorly profitable. The problem was, as Ruben alluded to earlier, finance is quite difficult in some of these countries, especially emerging markets. And we were actually borrowing money in the UK to build these flats in Brazil. But what happened is it was the same sort of timing as the economic crash. And obviously, when the economy crashed in Europe, and you had the sort of global financial crash, a lot of the banks like just pulled funding. And like, if you're in a position where you're investing in a country like Brazil, which is perceived as very high risk, and you're sourcing your finance from another country, like, those banks can just like rug pull you. And basically, if you're in the, like, luckily for us, we were just at the start of looking into this opportunity. But if you're further down the line, and all of a sudden your lender or your source of funds who's not based in that country decides, okay, at the moment, that's too risky for us, we no longer want exposure to that market, like, they can just pull the rug from you. And obviously that's a massive risk. So, a little bit of, like, obviously, if you're Brazilian and you can source funds within the country, and you know how to navigate the legal system and the financial system a bit better than maybe we did coming in, maybe your risks mightn't be as high, or maybe you can manage those risks better. But that's definitely a big thing to be able to to account for when you're considering.
It's a good point. I mean, when we went there, we had a really good contact who we met on our first trip out there, who was English speaking, and even she was kind of like, look, you guys are getting into this, but it's very difficult. You've got to remember, you're in Brazil. It's a different kind of country, a different environment. And yeah, we had her on board, and she had some really good contacts for us, but then we just kind of started to weigh it all up, and it was just too risky for us, even if we got pre-sales and all that kind of thing going, it was just too risky, and a country that we didn't have any clue about. And you're right about the Florianopolis point there, James, because with that part of the country, it's a bit more European. You know, you've got a lot of kind of foreign investors that are going into that area, so it was a bit more feasible to do development. Where I was looking in like Rio, Sao Paulo, it's a lot more. It's very kind of yeah, you've got to be a local to really kind of get into it. And as you said, James, I think if you've got a solid base of local contacts, perhaps even family, you know, and people that you genuinely trust, you know, and people that just don't look at you as some gringo that's going to be over there to, you know, and they can make a fast buck out of, because that's essentially the way you're looked at when you go out to these countries. You're not going to be looked at as, you know, as a local. So I think if you've got family out there, which is why I think, you know, more people, if you know, I know like a lot of Asian investors, for example, invest in India and stuff like that. Because they know the area, they've got family there, and they know how to navigate their way through the system, convoluted as it may be.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest, Ruben, like there is money to be made in these emerging markets, but obviously sure, there's risks that you've got to be able to negate, you know, and just like to bring this like a little bit closer to home, or to sort of drag it back in terms of like, obviously we're talking about large scale development here, but like, you know, you mentioned land rights in Brazil. Well, I actually live in Valencia at the moment, and there are similar issues with land rights and foreigners buying property in Valencia, in Spain, which you think would be relatively safe, where there's actually problems with the legal title. So, you know, there's been people who've bought houses in rural parts of Valencia, and they found like a few years down the road that actually they don't own it. And there's other sorts of legal issues with ownership of land. So this is not sort of limited to countries that we would perceive to be high risks, such as Brazil. I mean, you can find this stuff in Europe. And I think one of the questions you need to ask yourself when you're when you're investing abroad is, number one, like, do you really have the expertise to invest abroad? Is the risk reward ratio there? You know, so if you do take on a project, or if you buy a flat, like, how does the return compare to what you could actually earn in the UK? And also, you need to look at local things such as taxes, right? So, for example, in Spain, a lot of people come to Spain and they think they can buy a flat maybe off plan or whatever. But when you actually buy a property in Spain, the stamp duty, like the land tax, when you buy a property is 10%.
What is that
so
called
that's a
in
big
Spain, James?
transaction.
What's the stamp duty land tax called in Spain?
What's it called? Is it? I think it's EVA.
Right.
I think it's just called EVA.
And it's 10% of the purchase price. Wow.
Like 10% of the purchase price. So, like, not only have you got 10% of the purchase price, but also here in Valencia, like the estate agents, like when you go and view a property, they'll make you sort of sign, like it's called a hoja de visita, and it's basically like a form that says if you like that you viewed the property. That's what they tell you it's for. But if you look at the small print, it's got like transaction costs in there. So basically, if you complete on the purchase of property, you have to pay the estate agent. It can be up to like 5-6%.
Wow.
As a fee. So like there's little sort of tricks of the trade here that like estate agent use that really can be costly. But not only that, like obviously, as I mentioned, there's the tax issues to look out for in a country that you're considering. The land issues, as we spoke about before, like even recently, like I was looking at sort of property in Asia, and even over there in places like Vietnam and Thailand and stuff. I mean, for a start, you can't actually own the land. So you can buy an apartment, like an apartment building. Like say if I want to buy an apartment in Bangkok, you can buy that and you can own it outright, and that's fine. But if you want to buy like a villa, you can only get like a short leasehold on that villa. I think it's for 29 years. So you never actually own the land. The land actually has to be at least 51% owned by a Thai person.
Wow.
again, like these are like considerations that you have to sort of consider. So like, you know, looking into the land rights, what are the tax, what are the local taxes in the country? Also like finance, you know, finance is a big thing. Like in the UK, we're quite used to like, it's, I mean, you can complain about the banking system in the UK, but it's quite transparent. You generally know what you're paying for up front. There's not that many hidden charges. Like in Spain, for example, like when you go and look for a mortgage on a property, like the bank, they've got all these extra kind of things that they try and sell you on the back of a mortgage. Like for example, life assurance policies. I've got like 3 life assurance policies, even though I only own 2 properties over here. Like I've got bloody housing alarms that I don't need.
Is that like
I've
a condition
you
of
know,
the mortgage or something? Is it, or how does it work?
yeah, so what they'll do is they'll sell you the mortgage, but they'll say, okay, the headline rate of the mortgage is 4%, for example. But what we'll do is if you buy like a security alarm for your home, we'll drop it by 0.25%. Or if you buy like a flat screen TV, we'll drop it by 0.25%. If you take a life assurance, we'll drop it by 0.5%. And these kind of things are like,
They build up.
they're kind of no-brainers because they're reducing the monthly payments on your mortgage for the life of the term. So it's like you kind of have to buy them, but you end up with like a load of crap that you don't need. And then like they can also do things like, you know, right towards the end, they could change the loan to value of the loan, or it's just a lot more opaque, the banking system in Spain, I'd say, compared to the UK.
But one thing that you do benefit from, James, is the long-term mortgage. You know, so you've been able to fix those you've got for, was it 30 years fixed them for? So that's definitely a pro.
Yeah, I mean that's common in the US and Spain, right? Like you can fix mortgages for up to 30 years. And I think that's definitely an advantage, because I think in the UK what happens is we've become accustomed to this kind of like mortgage, like
after 2 to 5 years.
Yeah, just whoring around mortgages, right? Like every 5 years or every 2 to 3 years, you're paying like an extortionate arrangement fee. And these fees seem to be getting bigger and bigger because the banks know that they're getting away from it, or they're getting away with it. And obviously, like over the length of a mortgage, like if you've got a mortgage for 25 years, and let's say you've moved mortgage 7 or 8 times, and you're paying like 2% each time, like that's an extra sort of 15%.
Yeah.
You know, of the loan amount. All this kind of stuff like really adds up. So yeah, I'm definitely in favor of long-term mortgages. You know what you're paying for the life of the mortgage, and I'd imagine it brings repossession numbers down by quite a bit as well.
Yeah, and fixing rates basically, you know, which is you know, the ability to fix your rate for the long term is great, you know. And I think that's why probably the US housing market hasn't gone through the kind of turbulence as it should have done, because people have been able to fix for so long. I mean, I know the market slowed down over there, but yeah, a lot of people are just
well, they had a pretty bad crash the last time. I mean, in some areas it was massive drawdown.
Yeah, but I think people have been able to fix their rates at, you know, 2-3% out there, you know, for 30 years, which why would they want to leave that?
Yeah, it's definitely an advantage.
Yeah. So when you went out to Spain, James, you know, you went out there, obviously you've got a European passport, which is a major advantage. How did you find it when you first went out there? I mean, most people, when they're investing in Spain or any European country, they'd usually go through like a broker who's kind of based out there. But you went out there on your own back, really. So how did you kind of navigate your way through it? I mean, did you find a British lawyer, or did you, you know, how did you kind of buy that?
Yeah, I mean, I had a UK mortgage broker, and I also, well, I say UK, I mean he was English, based in Spain, so he helped me with the finance. I just found a property myself, and through a website called Idealista, which is like the right move of Spain. But I had some issues as well. I mean, initially I came out here with the plan of like buying buildings and renting them out and stuff like that. And I spent a lot of years kind of chasing my tail, like looking for opportunities. And I actually finally did get a building under contract. It was like a city centre building in the middle of Valencia, which I signed. It's called an Arras contract, which is a little bit similar to, like, I guess, a reservation agreement. It's like a pre-exchange contract. And I had that signed up. It was a really, really good deal. I had it actually on a lease option at the time. It was like an 8-year interest-free lease option. It was fantastic structure. But during the deal, the guy ended up leaving the country, going to America with my money, and I ended up having to chase him through his solicitors, and I ended up losing like maybe $5,000 in legal fees. And after that, I just thought, like, okay, like, why bother, right? Like, when the transaction costs are so high, when like there's this kind of stuff is going on, like, and I know the market in the UK so well. I've done it there before. Like, I know I can make money there. I know how the financial system works in the UK. Like, what is the real, like, draw? Do you know what I mean? Like, what's the reward for all this extra risk? And when I looked at it in the cold hard of day, I decided that, you know what, better off, like, in the UK. I mean, there are people that talk about, oh, you need to invest, like, you know, in your neighborhood or close where you live, within an hour of where you live. Well, I invest in the UK. I live in Spain, and it's perfect. You know what I mean? I can flip deals. I can rent deals. You know, I've got a pretty large portfolio that I rent to tenants. It's just about, like, growing a team and to be able to support
Things have
that.
changed over the last decade or so in terms of the ability to manage properties wherever you are. You know, I think it's definitely a lot easier now than it's ever been, you know, and it's probably going to continue with coming into place and all that kind of stuff, you know. So yeah, I mean, you went out there, you bought a property, you bought it at a really good level, and you did quite an extensive refurbishment to it, and then you've kind of lived in that property as your kind of second home. And then you bought another property out there, and done some other bits and pieces out in Spain, but primarily you've been involved in the UK. So yeah, I mean, in terms of doing things, you've kind of kept. I mean, do you work with Spanish lawyers, or do you work with? How does it work in terms of kind of getting the conveyancing done, or whatever the system's called out there in Spain? Do you have to collaborate with Spanish lawyers, or can you do it?
Well, the Spanish love admin. You know, they actually have a whole industry dedicated to admin called gestores, like gestores. And basically what they'll do is anything that you've got admin related, they'll kind of do it for you, and you pay them a fee. But in regards to, like, the conveyancing process, yeah, I mean, when I bought my first one, I hired a solicitor, and obviously that's the most advisable thing to do. But they have a secondary level that once you've got a solicitor, there's another kind of middleman that's called a notary, and they kind of do the same job as a solicitor, right? So they go through all the legal documents. They're supposed to tell you, like, if there's anything that to be aware of in the contract. And I subsequently found out on the second sale that actually I could cut out the solicitor and just use the notary. So it did save me a couple of €1,000. But I wouldn't advise that to people just coming over to Spain, especially if you're buying in, like, rural areas. Like, it's not so bad. For me, I was just buying in, like, the city centre of Valencia.
And you kind of were familiar with the area as well at that stage, right? You've been living there for a while.
Yeah, I'm kind of familiar with the system now and how it works here, you know. But, like, in saying that, like, Spain for me has never been. I mean, I would love Spain to be a better environment to invest in, but, like, with the finance system and the taxes and the transaction costs, like, for me, it's not a great place to invest. Like, I would say it's a good place to buy property as a lifestyle choice. Invest in the UK. I mean, I would love to go out to, like, let's say, build property in, like, Thailand or Vietnam, for example. I think the market there, especially Vietnam, is in recession at the moment. I'd say you could get land extremely cheap. But I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, if you're not in control of that business, like, if you want to set a company there, it's got to be 51% owned by a local, I mean, I'm just not going to open up myself to that sort of risk.
Yeah.
So like I said, I mean, in the UK, you know, you can buy the property 100% owned by yourself, and you've got an idea of how things work. Yeah, if you don't have somebody local, or you don't have very good connects in the place that you're going, then I would say it's extremely risky. And yeah, there can be very good returns to be made abroad, but there's also those risks that you need to sort of
Yeah, and I
think
guess
about.
you know, in countries like Spain, Portugal, well, a lot of Europe, you can if you can navigate your way around these systems and you know buy a decent property, there's always opportunities to do Airbnb and that kind of thing. I mean, Airbnb, I know you've Airbnb'd your flat out there, James, your apartment. How is it out there? Is it, as you know, I know like there's kind of planning restrictions coming in place over here in the UK. London, you're pretty much limited to how much you can Airbnb your flat. How restricted is it out there in Spain?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot more restricted than it used to be. I mean, now you have to get licensed if you want to Airbnb
Right.
your flat, and those licenses are getting extremely hard to get. And there's also various criteria that you have to pass in order to get a license. So particularly in the city centres, it's becoming extremely difficult unless you own the whole building. And even then, in certain areas where they consider it's saturated, you're going to struggle. And they've had a lot of kickback from like the hotel industry with regards to Airbnb.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's quite a different one. Me and you don't really have these conversations that
I'll
often.
just put just one more point, Ruben, just before you wrap it up here, because there was
Yeah.
something that I meant to mention when I was speaking about off plan earlier.
Yeah, sure.
One of the things that like a lot of people will look at as well, we kind of spoke about it earlier a little bit, but just to sort of a bit more on this point, like when you are looking at property abroad, and a lot of these developments that you will see abroad will be sold off plan or new build. And one of the things that you have to consider when you're buying off plan or new build is there is like a premium when you buy recently built stock, which is similar to sort of when you buy a new car and you like it's at least 10%. I'd say more like
Probably more,
15%.
yeah.
And I got caught out with this when I first started actually buying, even in the UK when I bought in Manchester, because the thing is, like, I was comparing it to other new build or other off-plan stock that was being built at the same time. And obviously you don't know if they're all over inflated. You know what I mean? You need to actually see what they're selling for on the resale market. And that's definitely something to be aware of if you're buying abroad, if you're looking at new builds, if you're buying off plan, whether it's in the UK or abroad, definitely you need to compare what you're buying to what resales are selling for, and not just new builds, because otherwise, I guess.
Sorry, James. Yeah, sorry.
In the example of Spain, let's say you buy a new build flat in Spain that's got a 15% new build premium on it, and you complete that purchase, and on the day of completion, you also have to pay the 10% stamp duty. Effectively, you're effectively 25% down the day you complete. So for all those people who've thought, I'll get in early, I'll wait for this build to complete, and then it finally completes, and let's say the market hasn't moved, or worse still, it's dropped, which can do. Like, the market can also go down in these areas. I mean, in Spain, it's been pretty strong of late, but it took a long time to get moving. And obviously, if you're in a stagnant or falling market, like, it could come to the sort of date of completion, and either like the bank says, okay, it's not worth enough to get the mortgage on it, so you're left with a shortfall. Or if your intention was to sell it, you find that suddenly you can't get the price that you were hoping for.
Yeah. Well,
Another thing that you need to,
when you're buying new builds, both here and abroad, you've got to remember that there's a number of other people buying new builds with you, so there's effectively a bit of an oversupply. I know we do have a housing shortage here in the UK, but You know, if you're buying one of 200 units with a bunch of other new build investors, that's going to affect the ultimate price that the property achieves, probably in the medium term. So you've got to be prepared to hold on to it for quite a while before you can get any kind of capital gains. And I think time and time again, that's what happens with new builds, regardless of where you are in the
world. And remember as well, like if you go to one of these, like the riskier the market you go to, the more chance of like a developer going bust during the build. And that's happened to people in Spain, where they've put large amounts of money down on an off-plan build. And it was actually the time of the last global crash.
There was a lot.
And then before, I mean, they went bust, and he lost all his money and never got a penny back. So another thing to take into account.
Yeah. So there's other fees as well. You know, you're looking at your bank transfer fees. You're probably going to need a translator. You know, for most people aren't fluent in their native in the languages of their country they're investing in. So you're probably going to need a good translator. Your legal fees, service charges for these units, they're probably going to be quite high, I'd imagine. A lot of these off-plan developers abroad, they're going to be charging buyer fees, local taxes, property taxes, income tax. You know, you need to check about what your liabilities would be, regardless of, you know, say you're drawing income from abroad. Is that going to affect your UK tax position? So there's a number of considerations that need to be taken on board, you know, before going ahead. And really, the level of due diligence you need to do is probably double or triple compared to buying a property in the UK, because you've just got all these other factors involved just by virtue of the fact that you're investing in a different jurisdiction, you know. So yeah, I'm not ruling it out. And I think what James has done is slightly different, because it's been more of a lifestyle choice for him. You know, he just doesn't like the cold weather of England and Ireland. So, you know, that's why he's done that.
Who does it, right?
Yeah, you know, I get it. And when I came to visit you, it was about a year and a half ago, I was like, right, yeah, this all makes perfect sense to me, you know. So it's one of those like lifestyle decisions that James has made, you know. But from an investment perspective, yeah, don't rule it out by all means, and it's good to diversify, but really make sure you understand what you're getting into, because there's a lot of risk, and probably a lot more risk than investing in the UK, I would say. But yeah, as I said, this is a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, as always, James. So yeah, I hope everyone's enjoying these podcasts, and yeah, feel free to drop myself or James a DM, and yeah, we look forward to having another conversation next week.
And just yeah, if you'd like and subscribe,
of course, yeah,
help us grow the reach of the podcast.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. All the best.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.